The rooftop bar at the Meridian Hotel commanded views of Chicago's glittering skyline. But Cassandra barely noticed the architectural brilliance surrounding her. She sat alone at a corner table, her emerald dress a stark contrast to her exhausted demeanor. As the lead architect on a massive downtown renovation project, she had been working 16-hour days, sacrificing sleep, relationships, and her own well-being for the sake of her vision. Her business partner had practically forced her into an evening out, insisting that one more night in the office would result in complete creative burnout. Now, she sat nursing a martini, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and crimson, wondering why she felt so profoundly alone in a room full of people. That's when she felt the shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't visible at first, just a subtle change in the air, a presence that made her skin prickle with inexplicable awareness. She didn't turn immediately, maintaining her careful composure while every nerve ending in her body suddenly screamed with attention. When she finally allowed her gaze to drift, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The man possessed an almost aristocratic beauty, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead. His charcoal suit fit his lean frame perfectly, and his eyes held a peculiar mixture of confidence and something deeper, something almost melancholic that suggested hidden depths. Marcus had been observing her for several minutes before their eyes met. In his line of work as an art collector, he had developed an extraordinary ability to recognize authenticity among forgery. And this woman radiated something rare and genuine, unlike the polished socialites surrounding him. All desperate for his attention and his considerable fortune, she seemed genuinely indifferent to his presence. She was lost in her own thoughts, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass with unconscious grace. Her makeup was understated, her jewelry minimal, her entire presentation suggesting someone more interested in substance than status. She represented everything he had never found in his carefully controlled world. He stood before courage could desert him and moved to her table with practiced elegance. "You have the expression of someone plotting an elaborate escape," he said, his voice warm with genuine amusement rather than arrogance. Cassandra looked up, her initial response of polite dismissal dying on her lips. The moment she saw him clearly, something shifted within her. It wasn't just his striking features or the expensive tailoring of his suit. It was his eyes. They held genuine kindness, a softness that contradicted his sharp exterior, as though he was truly offering connection rather than seduction. She found herself smiling, something she hadn't done in weeks. "Is it that obvious?" she replied, surprising herself with her honesty. "My colleagues think I work too much. My business partner thinks I've forgotten how to be social, and they're probably right. But sitting in rooms like this doesn't exactly inspire social engagement." Cassandra gestured to the crowd around them, all performing their carefully curated versions of themselves. Marcus pulled out the chair across from her, his movements graceful and deliberate. "My business associates would say something identical about me. They believe wealth requires constant networking, as if meaningful human connection can be purchased at events like this. As if we're here to collect contacts rather than connect with actual people." He extended his hand across the table. "Marcus," he introduced himself simply. "Cassandra," she replied, her hand meeting his. His touch was warm, his grip gentle but firm, conveying confidence without pretension. They talked as the evening transformed into night, their conversation flowing with remarkable naturalness. She told him about her architectural passion, about designing buildings that reflected human aspiration and creativity. She shared her frustration with compromise, with clients who valued profit over beauty, with the constant battle to maintain integrity in a commercial world that constantly demanded compromise. Marcus shared his own struggles, revealing how wealth had become paradoxically isolating. He described the loneliness of never knowing whether people valued him or simply coveted his resources. He spoke about his art collection with genuine passion, about the way beautiful things sometimes felt like expensive distractions from his actual emptiness. There was a vulnerability in his admission that made Cassandra see beyond his polished exterior to the lonely man beneath, the person who yearned for authentic connection as desperately as she did. By the time midnight approached, they had created their own universe within that crowded bar. Other patrons seemed to fade into irrelevance. The outside world became distant and unimportant. When Marcus asked if she wanted to continue their conversation somewhere more private, Cassandra knew the rational response. She didn't know him. This was impulsive, completely unlike her careful nature. Yet when he looked at her with those compelling eyes, every logical objection dissolved like morning mist. "Yes," she whispered, and felt something fundamental shift inside her, like the moment a bridge ignites and changes course forever. His car waited outside, a sleek Mercedes that spoke of considerable wealth. But Cassandra found herself unconcerned with his money. She cared only about the intensity blazing between them, the electric awareness that made her skin feel alive with possibility. When he asked if she wanted to rethink this, she responded by moving closer to him, her decision absolute and irrevocable. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing his jawline with wonder, and he caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. "Tell me this is real," he whispered, his sophisticated composure cracking for just a moment. "It is," she assured him. "Whatever this is, it's real." They drove through the Chicago night toward his penthouse, both understanding that they were stepping into something neither could control or predict, something that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of their lives. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of one of Chicago's most exclusive towers. Floor 2 ceiling windows revealed the city sprawled below like a glittering kingdom, diamonds scattered across black velvet. But neither Cassandra nor Marcus paid attention to the view. The elevator seemed to move in slow motion, the tension between them building with each ascending floor until it became almost unbearable. When the doors finally opened to his private entrance, they collided against each other, with the desperation of 2 people who had searched for connection their entire lives and finally found it in another person's arms. His hands tangled in her hair while hers gripped his shoulders, pulling him closer. They moved through his apartment in a trail of abandoned clothing, unable to break contact, unwilling to waste seconds on separation. Her emerald dress fell to the marble floor. His charcoal suit jacket followed. They left a pathway of abandonment behind them, like breadcrumbs, marking a journey toward intimacy. His penthouse bedroom overlooked the city, but Marcus closed the blackout curtains, creating an intimate sanctuary where only they existed, where time became irrelevant and the outside world ceased to matter. What followed was passionate and tender simultaneously, his touch conveying both hunger and reverence, as though she was something infinitely precious that might shatter if handled carelessly. He whispered her name against her skin like a prayer, like a confession, like he was learning a new language through her body. She responded with equal intensity, her nails tracing patterns across his chest as she memorized the geography of him, determined to remember every detail. Later, in the darkness before dawn, they lay intertwined, his arm protectively across her waist, her head resting on his chest, where she could hear his heartbeat. Cassandra had never experienced such complete contentment, such absolute rightness, as though she had been fragmented her entire life and had only now been made whole. She traced the contours of his chest with her fingertips, marveling at the connection that had formed so rapidly, wondering how it was possible to feel so known by someone she had met mere hours ago. "Tell me something," she whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible. "Something true that you've never told anyone else. Something that scares you to admit." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his chest rising and falling beneath her hand. "I've spent my entire life building walls, protecting myself from potential disappointment," he finally admitted, his voice raw with honesty. "I told myself I was too damaged for real connection, that everyone wanted something from me. But then you walked into that bar, and suddenly all my careful defenses felt pointless and wasteful. You made me believe that maybe I could be more than just my money, more than my family legacy." He paused, his voice growing heavier with emotion. "The truth is, I'm terrified, not of you rejecting me, but of myself. Of becoming the person you think I am, and discovering I'm fundamentally incapable of being that person. Of disappointing you completely when you finally see who I really am." Cassandra lifted her head to look at him, in the gray pre-dawn light filtering through the curtains. His face was vulnerable in sleep's approach, stripped of the careful armor he wore in public. "Then don't," she said simply. "Be honest with me always. That's all I need. Not perfection. Not the sanitized version of yourself. Just truth. Promise me that." He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering against her skin. "I promise," he whispered, and she drifted into sleep, believing absolutely that love had found them both. That they had discovered something rare and authentic that would endure beyond this moment. The morning brought complications neither anticipated. Cassandra woke to Marcus receiving an urgent phone call, his voice suddenly shifting into a tone she hadn't heard before. It was clipped, authoritative, discussing financial transactions and business dealings with rapid-fire efficiency that suggested practiced deception. She realized she knew almost nothing about him beyond the carefully curated version he had presented. When he noticed her watching him, something flickered across his face. Guilt, perhaps, or concern that she might ask questions he wasn't prepared to answer. "I'm sorry," he said, ending the call abruptly. "Business that needs immediate attention. Boring financial matters." He attempted to smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Cassandra sat up, drawing the sheet around herself, suddenly feeling exposed, despite their intimacy. "Who are you really, Marcus? What do you do that requires such urgent morning calls, and that particular tone of authority?" Her architect's mind had already begun filing away inconsistencies, cataloging small details that didn't quite align. He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking weary, as though the weight of the world had settled onto his shoulders overnight. "I told you, I'm an art collection." "That's true, but it's incomplete," he began carefully. "My family has considerable wealth, centuries of it actually. We're involved in various investment portfolios, real estate development, international business ventures. My father runs the family empire, but I'm expected to eventually take over operations." The call was about expanding one of our international portfolios. "Why didn't you mention this?" Cassandra asked, her tone careful but probing. "You could have told me you came from wealth." "That's not a character flaw, Marcus." He turned to face her, and she saw something shift in his expression. "Because last night, for the first time in years, someone looked at me without seeing dollar signs or family power or future prospects," he replied quietly. "I wanted to stay in that moment where I was just a man, not a fortune. Was that wrong? Was I selfish to want that purity of connection?" Cassandra considered this with the analytical mind that made her an exceptional architect. She understood the desire to be seen rather than judged by circumstances of birth or wealth. She herself had fought constantly against being dismissed as just another woman in a male-dominated industry, wanting recognition for her talent rather than her appearance. "No," she finally said, reaching for his hand. "But we need honesty now. No more omissions. No more carefully constructed versions of truth. If this is going to be real, we have to be completely transparent." Marcus nodded, but as he pulled her close, something in his expression suggested he was hiding more than just family business details. Layers of deception that went far deeper than wealth or privilege. Over the following weeks, they became inseparable in a way that consumed both their waking hours and their dreams. They explored Chicago together, walked through architectural landmarks, while she explained her design philosophy and creative process. He took her to private galleries throughout the city, teaching her about art history and aesthetic theory with passionate eloquence. He showed her provenance documents and shared stories about the artists behind the works, and she listened with genuine fascination. Their physical connection remained passionate and consuming. But beneath the passion, something darker was beginning to surface. Cassandra began noticing small inconsistencies in his stories, details that didn't quite align, conversations that seemed to change direction when she asked specific questions, late-night calls where he spoke in hushed tones, business trips to countries that seemed unusual for art collection but made sense for international smuggling operations. If you knew what to look for. She told herself she was being paranoid, that love made people suspicious, that she was projecting her own fears onto a man who had done nothing wrong beyond being guarded about his family business. One evening, while Marcus showered after returning from an unexpected trip to Istanbul, his laptop screen illuminated with an incoming email. Cassandra didn't mean to look, but a single line caught her attention, hovering on the screen like a dark prophecy, regarding the extraction of the artifact and the offshore accounts, established for transaction. Concealment. Her heart began racing with the sickening speed of someone who knows they're about to discover something that will change everything irreversibly. She clicked gently, opening email threads that revealed something shocking and deeply disturbing. Marcus wasn't just a wealthy collector with family business interests. He appeared to be actively involved in illegal antiquities trafficking, operating an international smuggling operation that used his legitimate art collection as cover and smokescreen. The emails detailed stolen artifacts from archaeological sites, movement through shell corporations with impenetrable naming structures, and sales to wealthy collectors worldwide who asked no questions about provenance. She stumbled backward, her mind reeling through implications and questions. The man she had fallen for, the person who had made her believe in connection and authenticity, had been deceiving her completely on a scale she couldn't quite process. And the deception ran far deeper than mere omission of family wealth. This was criminal enterprise. This was theft and illegal trafficking in international crime on a sophisticated level. She scrolled through more emails, her hands trembling. There were discussions about bribing customs officials, falsifying documents, and selling artifacts worth millions to anonymous buyers through encrypted channels. There were references to his father and older brother, as if they were organizational hierarchy members. There were communications about recent acquisitions from Greece, Egypt, Peru, and Cambodia. This wasn't a passion for art appreciation. This was organized crime disguised as legitimate business. Cassandra felt something inside her crystallize into sharp clarity. The passion they had shared in his bedroom suddenly seemed tainted, every intimate moment questioned. Had he targeted her intentionally? Her work involved designing the Meridian Museum expansion, a project that would house an extensive antiquities collection. Had their meeting been manufactured to gain insider information about security systems? She closed the laptop carefully, trying to arrange her thoughts into coherent patterns. When Marcus emerged from the shower, towel wrapped around his waist, his dark hair wet and falling into his eyes. She looked at him as though seeing him for the first time. He was a stranger, wearing a face she had memorized. He was danger disguised as romance. She didn't confront him that night. Instead, she spent hours staring at the ceiling of his penthouse bedroom, listening to him sleep, and processing the devastating realization that she had fallen in love with an illusion, that every promise and confession had been performed by a sophisticated liar. By morning, she had decided what she had to do. Cassandra spent the next 3 days in a state of careful normalcy, playing the role of devoted girlfriend, while her internal world collapsed. She went to work designing building systems and studying security protocols, then returned to Marcus's penthouse each evening, allowing him to hold her as though nothing had changed. She let him kiss her forehead and whisper endearments, while her heart fractured into smaller pieces with each passing hour. On the 4th day, she contacted David Chen, an old friend from university, who had become a federal investigator specializing in art crime. She met him at a coffee shop far from downtown, in a neighborhood where nobody would recognize her. She brought printouts of the emails, her hands shaking as she slid them across the table. David's expression shifted from casual friendliness to grave concern as he reviewed the documents. "Cassandra, this is serious," he said quietly, leaning forward so no one could overhear. "These people are dangerous. This isn't amateur hour. This is one of the most sophisticated antiquities smuggling operations we've been tracking for years. The family he comes from has international connections and doesn't tolerate betrayal or cooperation with authorities." "I need to know," Cassandra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Was I a target? Did he approach me for information about the museum security?" David's hesitation answered before his words did. "We believe Marcus was assigned to develop relationships with individuals connected to major cultural institutions. Your work on the Meridian Museum expansion made you a valuable contact. Whether his feelings for you are genuine or part of an elaborate cover is something we can't definitively determine from emails alone." The words hit her like physical blows. "So he targeted me from the beginning. The bar was coincidence, but his interest was calculated." "Possibly," David admitted. "But Cassandra, people are complex. It's possible both things are true. He may have initially approached you for intelligence purposes, but developed genuine feelings in the process. Criminals are capable of authentic emotion, even within a framework of deception." "That doesn't make it acceptable," Cassandra said, her voice sharpening. "That doesn't erase the fundamental betrayal. I need you to tell me what I should do. Do I go to the police? Do I warn him? Do I just walk away?" David set down the documents carefully. The federal government would very much like Marcus Thornton to cooperate. We've been building this case for years. If you could continue your relationship for a few more weeks while we coordinate with authorities, we could gather evidence that would ensure convictions." Cassandra felt sick. "You want me to spy on him? You want me to become an informant against someone I love?" "I want you to understand the severity of the situation," David replied gently. "These people are trafficking stolen cultural heritage that belongs to nations and peoples. They're moving money through illegal channels. They're bribing government officials. This isn't some victimless white-collar crime. This has real consequences for real people. And if you're involved with Marcus, you're potentially an accessory whether you realize it or not." She stood up abruptly. "I need to think. I can't make this decision right now." That evening, she confronted Marcus. She didn't give him the opportunity to construct another careful lie. She simply told him. She knew about the smuggling operation and waited for his response. His reaction confirmed her darkest suspicions. He didn't deny anything. Instead, he admitted to everything, his careful composure crumbling into raw desperation, as though he had been waiting for this moment, dreading it and expecting it simultaneously. "I did meet you intentionally," he confessed, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "My family had someone target you because of your work on the Meridian Museum expansion. We needed information about the security infrastructure, the layout, the protocols being installed. It was supposed to be simple intelligence gathering." Cassandra felt something crack inside her chest, a sound like breaking glass. "So I was just a job assignment?" "No," Marcus said desperately, reaching for her. "That's where it started, yes. But Cassandra, everything else was real. The connection we formed, my feelings for you, none of that was planned. You changed me. When I was with you, I wanted to be different. I wanted to be the man you believed me to be." She pulled away from his touch. "You can't ask me to believe that, Marcus. You can't compartmentalize your life like this. You're a criminal. Whatever we had is built on deception and betrayal." "Then let me stop," he said desperately, his voice breaking. "I'll walk away from the family business. I'll cooperate with authorities. I'll do whatever it takes to prove this is real, that what I feel for you is genuine." She looked at this man she had loved, this person who had promised her honesty and given her elaborate lies instead. "You can't," she said quietly, understanding the impossible complexity of his situation. "You're too entangled. This is who you are, Marcus. Not despite the smuggling, but including it. I can't be part of this world. I won't." "Cassandra, please." He reached for her again. "I love you. I know that sounds hollow, given everything, but it's true. I've never felt this way about anyone. You make me want to be better." "Then prove it," she said, her voice steady, despite the hurricane raging inside her. "Turn yourself in. Cooperate with the federal investigation. Face what you've done and accept the consequences. That's the only way you can prove anything to me now." She left the penthouse that night, her heart shattered, but her integrity intact. She didn't look back as she walked through the door. She didn't respond to his desperate calls and text messages that flooded her phone. She simply closed that chapter of her life and tried to figure out how to rebuild from the ashes of such profound betrayal. The weeks following her departure from Marcus's life were brutal in ways Cassandra hadn't anticipated. She lost weight. She couldn't sleep. She found herself staring into space during meetings, completely unable to focus on architectural designs that suddenly seemed meaningless. Her colleagues became concerned, suggesting she take medical leave, but she refused. Work was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. David called 3 weeks after her confrontation with Marcus. "He's cooperating," David said without preamble. "Marcus came to us voluntarily. He's providing detailed information about the entire smuggling operation. Names, dates, financial transactions, everything. He's agreed to testify against his father and older brother in exchange for a reduced sentence." Cassandra felt conflicting emotions crash through her simultaneously. Relief that he was doing the right thing, anger that it had taken her departure to force his conscience, sadness that the price of his redemption would be years of imprisonment. "How long?" she asked quietly. "Minimum 10 years, possibly 15, depending on what comes out during trial," David replied. "He's looking at substantial federal charges, but his cooperation is making a massive difference. We're unraveling a 20-year international smuggling operation because of the intelligence he's providing. Over the following months, the story broke nationally. Newspapers ran features about the criminal enterprise, the arrested CEO and businessmen involved, the stolen artifacts being recovered and returned to their countries of origin. Marcus's name appeared frequently, described as both perpetrator and cooperating witness. Cassandra saw his photograph in articles and forced herself to read them, despite the pain. She watched his transformation from charming businessman to admitted criminal from a distance, like observing someone's life through glass. She could see through, but not penetrate. She threw herself into her work with single-minded determination. The Meridian Museum expansion became her masterpiece, a building designed with careful attention to security, to light, to the proper presentation of irreplaceable cultural artifacts. She won awards for the design. She became known throughout Chicago as an architect of exceptional vision and skill. But each accolade felt hollow, because she had designed the building knowing that Marcus had been part of the team trying to exploit it. For criminal purposes, months turned into a year. Marcus's trial took place over 3 months. He testified against his own family members, describing the smuggling operation in meticulous detail. Cassandra forced herself to watch portions of the trial coverage. Seeing him on screen in prison clothing, his face aged and worn despite his youth. She heard him describe his crimes without excuse or mitigation, accepting responsibility for his actions in a way that suggested genuine transformation rather than legal strategy. His father received a 25-year sentence. His brother received 18 years. Marcus received 12 years, his cooperation reducing his sentence substantially. When the judge pronounced sentence, Cassandra watched Marcus nod slowly, as though he had expected this outcome, and accepted it as fair payment for his crimes. She received a letter from him while he was in federal prison in North Carolina. It arrived at her office, forwarded through David, who had become her occasional contact with Marcus's situation. The envelope was plain, addressed in Marcus's careful handwriting. She stared at it for 3 days before opening it. "Cassandra," it began, "I know I don't deserve your attention or forgiveness. I'm writing this not to ask for either, but to tell you something you should know. Meeting you was the moment my life began changing direction, though I was too corrupt and compromised to recognize it at the time. You represented everything I had never found in my life: authenticity, integrity, genuine human connection, untainted by money or status. When I was lying to you, when I was deceiving you, part of me was dying inside because I knew you represented my better self, the person I could be if I had the courage to transform. I'm writing this from a prison cell because I finally had the courage you inspired, but didn't have the capacity to show you. I'm here because I chose accountability. I chose to stop running and face what I had done. That choice came from remembering who I wanted to be for you, even though I had lost the opportunity to ever be that person in your life. I'm not asking for second chances or forgiveness. I'm simply telling you that you saved me, not by loving me, but by refusing to accept anything less than my best self. You may never know this, but I carry that with me every single day." She read the letter 7 times, crying through portions of it, before placing it carefully in a drawer where she wouldn't have to see it daily, but would always know it existed. 5 years passed with the slow, grinding passage of someone moving through life on autopilot. Cassandra became one of Chicago's most respected architects, designing buildings that spoke to human aspiration and cultural significance. She won major contracts, led her own firm, and built a reputation for excellence and integrity. Professionally, she had achieved everything she had ever desired. Her personal life remained largely empty. She went on dates occasionally, but nothing took root. Men were put off by her emotional distance, her tendency to withdraw when intimacy threatened to deepen. She had given her heart completely once and had watched it be trampled, and she couldn't quite convince herself to be that vulnerable again. It was a Tuesday morning in late autumn when she walked into her favorite coffee shop near her office downtown. She was standing in line, mentally reviewing her schedule for the day, when she heard a voice that made her entire body go rigid. "Is it really you?" She turned slowly, and there was Marcus. He looked different. Older, certainly. Prison had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there before. His hair was longer, and he had a careful way of holding himself, as though he wasn't entirely sure he belonged in public spaces. He was dressed simply, in jeans and a button-down shirt, looking like someone rebuilding their life from the ground up. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I live here now," he said quietly. "I was released 8 months ago. I've been working as an art consultant for a legitimate gallery, helping stolen artifacts get returned to their countries of origin. It's penance, I suppose. Trying to undo some of the damage I helped cause." He studied her carefully. "You look well. More than well. I've seen articles about your work. The Meridian Museum design was extraordinary. I knew it would be the moment I saw your vision for it." She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to turn away, to protect herself from the vulnerability of seeing him, but another part of her recognized that this moment was somehow necessary, a conclusion to a chapter that had never properly closed. "Would you like to get coffee with me?" Marcus asked carefully, as though speaking to someone frightened. "Just coffee. No expectations. Just, ... I'd like to talk to you if you're willing." She found herself nodding. They sat in a corner of the coffee shop, and he told her about his years in prison. How difficult the first 18 months had been. How he had eventually found purpose in mentoring other inmates. How reading had become his refuge and redemption. He talked about therapy and processing trauma, about learning to take responsibility for harm caused, and building a life rooted in genuine service rather than acquisition. Cassandra told him about her professional success and her personal emptiness. How building beautiful structures had filled the void he had left, but not healed it completely. She told him she had read his letters, the few he had sent, and how they had confused her by revealing depth and genuine transformation. She hadn't known how to reconcile with his crimes. "I don't expect anything from you," Marcus said carefully, "but I needed you to know that you mattered, that the experience of knowing you, even while I was lying to you, changed the trajectory of my entire life. Sometimes people come into our lives not to stay, but to show us what's possible, what we could become if we're brave enough to transform ourselves." They talked for 3 hours, and when they parted ways, both understood that something fundamental had shifted. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was recognition that people could change, that redemption was possible, and that love didn't always have to look like continuation. Sometimes it looked like acceptance. Over the following months, Cassandra and Marcus developed a cautious friendship. They would occasionally meet for coffee or lunch, rebuilding their connection on foundations of honesty rather than passion. It was slower, more deliberate, and infinitely more real than their initial explosive connection had been. Marcus was different now, stripped of pretense and financial armor. He worked modest jobs that paid little, but allowed him to sleep at night. Cassandra watched him rebuild himself, piece by piece, watching the transformation with both curiosity and careful emotional distance. 6 months into their renewed friendship, Marcus asked Cassandra if she would visit an exhibition he had been working on for months. It was at a small gallery in the River North district, and he had been instrumental in helping to organize the display of recovered artifacts that were being returned to their countries of origin. The exhibition told stories of theft and restoration, of cultural patrimony reclaimed through legal channels and international cooperation. Cassandra arrived on opening night and found Marcus standing in front of a piece, a Greek statue that had been stolen from an archaeological site 50 years ago. He was explaining its significance to a young couple interested in the historical context. When he saw Cassandra, his face lit up with genuine joy, unguarded and authentic, in a way that made her heart ache with complicated emotion. He took her through the exhibition personally, explaining the history of each artifact, the circumstances of its theft, the negotiations that had led to its recovery and return. He spoke with passion and reverence about cultural heritage and the responsibility wealthy nations had to honor the patrimony of other cultures. She could see in his face that this work mattered to him profoundly, that it was genuine penance and genuine passion intertwined. As they stood before a Peruvian textile, Marcus took her hand gently. "I want you to know that everything I told you 5 years ago in prison about what you meant to me was absolutely true," he said quietly. "But I also want you to know that I've spent these years becoming someone worthy of that truth. Not for you, necessarily. For myself, for the people I harmed, for the cultures whose treasures were stolen. I've spent years understanding that redemption isn't about forgetting what we did. It's about building something better with the time we have left." Cassandra looked at their intertwined hands, feeling the familiar electricity between them, but tempered now with understanding and hard-won wisdom. "I believe you," she said. "I can see that you've changed. I can feel it." "I have a question," Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly. "And you can say no without any repercussions or judgment, but I need to ask it." She turned to face him fully, her architect's mind already trying to anticipate what was coming. "Would you be willing to try again?" he asked. "Not immediately. Not without continued work and therapy and genuine rebuilding of trust. But someday. Would you consider giving us a second chance? Not the passionate explosion of before, but something slower, more deliberate, rooted in who we actually are, rather than who we pretended to be." Cassandra felt tears sliding down her face, surprising herself. She thought about the girl she had been 5 years ago, so desperate for connection that she had ignored warning signs. She thought about the woman she was now, harder, but also wiser, more discerning, but also more capable of forgiveness. She thought about Marcus in his prison cell, choosing to transform himself not for romance but for genuine accountability. "I need time," she said finally. "But yes. Not now, but someday. Yes." They continued their friendship with new parameters, both of them seeing therapists. Both of them processing the trauma of deception and betrayal and redemption. Marcus got promoted at the gallery, eventually becoming director of collections. Cassandra took on the largest architectural commission of her career, designing a new museum wing dedicated specifically to cultural repatriation. They consulted with each other on these projects, their professional respect growing alongside their personal healing. 18 months later, Marcus asked Cassandra to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in a quiet neighborhood. She recognized the careful intention behind his choice of venue, the deliberate avoidance of pretentious displays or dramatic performance. They ordered simple food and drank local wine, and halfway through the meal, Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "I want to spend my life with you," he said simply. "Not because of what we were before, because of who we've become. You are the most remarkable, courageous, principled person I've ever known. You held me accountable when I needed it most. You refused to enable my crimes by accepting convenient lies. And then, when I had actually transformed myself, you gave me the grace of a second chance. I don't deserve that grace, but I will spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of it." "I love you," Cassandra said, the words emerging from a place of genuine feeling rather than desperate passion. "Not despite the betrayal and prison and all the pain we experienced together, but including it, because you became someone better, because I became someone stronger, because we both understand now that real love isn't about perfection or illusion. It's about choosing each other repeatedly through every season of life." He kissed her then, and it was different from their first kiss 5 years ago. This kiss carried weight and history and hard-won understanding. This kiss was made of accountability and redemption, and the recognition that love sometimes required patience and pain before it could become real. They married 18 months later, in a small ceremony attended only by close friends and family. Cassandra wore a simple, cream-colored dress that she had designed herself. Marcus stood at the altar with tears streaming down his face, still amazed that he had been given this second chance at happiness. David, the federal investigator who had unknowingly brought them back together, served as a witness. Their honeymoon was a journey through Europe, visiting archaeological sites and museums, seeing the beauty that existed when cultural treasures were preserved and protected rather than stolen and exploited. They stood before ancient temples and Renaissance paintings, and Marcus held Cassandra's hand as though she was the most valuable artifact in existence. Years passed. Cassandra and Marcus built a life rooted in purpose and integrity. They adopted 2 children from the foster system, giving homes to kids who had experienced their own versions of betrayal and loss. They volunteered with organizations that helped formerly incarcerated individuals rebuild their lives. They traveled and designed and created and loved fiercely, understanding that every moment was a gift, that redemption was possible, and that second chances required both people to choose transformation and growth. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to the rooftop bar where they had first met. It had been renovated and modernized, but the essential feeling remained the same. They sat at the same bar where fate had nudged them together, older now, and carved by life's experiences, but somehow more beautiful for it. Do you regret it? Marcus asked gently, taking her hand. The pain, the betrayal, everything we had to endure. Cassandra considered the question carefully, understanding that it deserved an honest answer. I regret the deception, she said finally. I regret that you were involved in crimes that harmed people, but I don't regret us. I don't regret the pain that forced me to become stronger, more discerning, more capable of genuine forgiveness. I don't regret that you were transformed by the consequences of your actions. I would choose this every single time. Every complication, every challenge, every beautiful messy moment. So would I, Marcus said, squeezing her hand. You changed my life that night, not because of passion, though that was real, but because you made me believe that I could be more than my crimes, that redemption was possible, that love could survive betrayal, if both people were willing to do the work of transformation. Their story had become the kind that people referenced when they wanted proof that true love existed. Not the fairy tale kind that glossed over difficulties and pretended that passion alone could sustain commitment, but the real kind, the kind where two people chose each other repeatedly through sickness and health, through passion and partnership, through betrayal and redemption, through every season of life. People asked them about their love story, and Cassandra and Marcus would exchange a knowing look. That same look they had shared when he first sat down at her table in that bar. They understood the greatest truth that life had taught them. The best love stories aren't about the beginning. They aren't about the passionate first encounters or the explosive chemistry. They're about the commitment to continue. They're about choosing to show up day after day, in good times and difficult times, in joy and in suffering, in success and in failure. Real love was the choice to build something lasting with someone who had disappointed you, but who was genuinely committed to becoming better. Real love was accepting that people could change if they were brave enough to face their sins and take responsibility for their actions. Real love was patience and forgiveness and the willingness to be vulnerable again even after being hurt. As they sat in that bar, older and wiser, still holding hands, still looking at each other with that particular intensity that had ignited a decade and a half ago, they understood that they had found something rarer than passion. They had found redemption. They had found forgiveness. They had found each other not because of fate or perfect circumstances, but because they had both chosen, repeatedly, to transform themselves into people capable of genuine love. And that, they understood completely, was what made their story truly extraordinary.